I used to think that being too sensitive or that being intense or that feeling emotions strongly was a bad thing. I think when I was younger, I was a little cold, but now that I realize it was just a mask to, maybe not show emotion and not show my actual feelings. And sometimes I think it was a way for me to avoid conflict and avoid um, maybe validating my experience, and maybe over validating other people's experiences, or as a way to validate or understand other people's behaviors. And I think I'm a quiet or somehow um, good under like good at understanding people. And when you try to like put yourself in other people's shoes, sorry. I think I'm good at that. Um, but it comes to a point where it's not the best thing if you're doing it too much, or at least if you don't do it in a conscious way. It's a good thing to understand other people and to validate other people's emotions and behaviors. No, well, maybe not behaviors, emotions. If you understand their stories and the context, I think it's good to some extent, but that's not necessarily that doesn't necessarily validate other people's behaviors, and your or you engaging in some situations that might not be good for yourself, but that might make yourself uncomfortable. And I understand that like ourselves, like in our own experiences, we have to like reflect on our um input into relationships, of course, but sometimes there are situations where you are invalidating yourself and your feelings, and then you're engaging in behaviors that are not good for you and probably not good for your relationships either way, especially those relationships that are one-sided. And I think I drifted a little bit from the actual uh point of this introduction, but today we'll talk about our emotional health. And as you know, we've been in the last few episodes, we've been talking about our dimensions of life and the dimensions of life that determine our health and our happiness and having a functioning and healthy and nice life. Those six dimensions are our emotional health, our environmental health, our relational health, our physical health, our mental health, and our existential health. So we've talked about our relationships, we've talked about our environment, we've talked about our mindset, and today we'll talk about our emotional health. So welcome to the podcast. This is your host, Marco. I am a marketer, fitness coach, singer, and astrology student, amongst other things. In fact, those are things I do. It's not necessarily who I am, but I guess that's part of who I am. But yeah, I'm on a journey to discover what it means to be human. I am on a quest to build a community that helps us believe in ourselves, unleash our inner power, and reclaim our voices through self discovery. So, if you enjoy discussing topics such as fitness, relationships, astrology, and human stories, please feel free to subscribe, share, or reach out. Together, through the power of stories and conversation, we can grow stronger as a community. I would like to invite you to subscribe or like this episode if you actually liked it. Even if you don't, or maybe if you don't agree with what I say, maybe like show a little bit of like, hey, I acknowledge what you're doing. And at least you validate the effort and the intention, to just like create conversation and to create spaces where we can just find ways to um connect and to grow and to be of service and of value, at least from sharing a different perspective that you might not agree with, but I think that can only add to society in general and to life in general, add value. So yeah, feel free to subscribe and like this video. I am actually very happy because today is I'm recording my 5th episode, or this is my 5th episode. I usually record it on Sundays. I've been consistent with the recording of the episode for the last 5 weeks in a row, and I think that's something really cool. um and it talks about, it speaks about responsibility and consistency. I've had this idea, or I've worked in this podcast or in the concept of the podcast for quite a while, but now I was finally able, and I finally decided to start doing it. This is this podcast. I love talking. If you haven't realized by now, and I do love conversation, but sometimes I like things to be perfect, and I think that was, although there's value in thinking or actually engaging in behaviors and mindsets that strive to be perfect, although I find that's kind of like true, I understand that perfection is kind of like, we will probably won't reach perfection. So perfection is just like actually doing things and understanding that in that space, or in that room for improvement, is actually perfection. So I started recording this podcast 5 weeks ago, and yeah, I'm proud of that, because otherwise I would have waited like for I don't know, years and years and years before I actually started doing this podcast. And this is kind of like how I see that this podcast is, or the reality I want for this podcast is kind of different from what it is right now, but I will get there through action, because I was living too into my mind. So, I actually kind of like listened to my last episode, and I was like, you know what, you need you need to start. I kind of like I've realized in the last few episodes that this podcast is kind of like for me and the things that I actually have to do. So I might as well just um I said, like, I might as well just start with what I have right now. So again, today we'll talk about emotional health, and I talked also about consistency, and I wanted to tell this example about consistency and showing up every week, because this is later in this episode. This is gonna, be good for understanding what we're talking about today. Okay, so emotional health. According to what I've studied with Precision Nutrition, which is a company that I really like, and I want to give them the credit, because I feel like they do an amazing job at helping people feel better and be healthier through habits, and through mindset, and through accountability, and through understanding, and through seeing the person as a complex being, as a multi-dimensional being. So I think they're really good at that. So yeah. So what is emotional health? So emotional health would be feeling a full range of emotions, but also feeling or having more positive emotions than negative. Also recognizing and appropriately expressing emotions, regulating, and being able to respond to emotional challenges in a resilient and productive way. So that's kind of like the definition of being emotionally healthy. And I wanted to say something about right now, like if you go to social media and like society in general, there's like this group of people who are like, yes, we have to validate emotions, and they're very knowledgeable about emotions and add a lot of value to at least opening the conversation about emotional health and mental health, and our relationships and our health, physical health in general. But sometimes I see like there's this line where it kind of like goes into people thinking that being emotionally healthy is actually not having emotion or feeling like good all the time, which it's it's not about just feeling positive emotions, which obviously is important, and I think that's the goal. Maybe not only having emotional, but the majority of our time having, like, like a pleasant and enjoyable experience and emotion, enjoyable feelings in our body and in our experience. But sometimes people are like, if you're like I don't think being sensitive or being intense or being like too into your feelings, sometimes it's not that rewarded. Or at least that's my perspective, or that's at least how I've seen it. Maybe I should change to the things I say. um, but especially in the world of like dating, and also like in other aspects of life, but especially in dating, like when someone is texting in a consistent basis and then maybe they don't respond, and they have like this inconsistency, or the person you care about is not responsive, or they're not consistent, or they're confusing. If you feel bad about that, then people are like, oh, you need to see, of course, you need to self-regulate and have a functional response to those situations. But sometimes people are like, oh, you should not feel anxious, or you have, I actually heard it from this girl on social media. I'll try to find, I don't remember her name, but I think she says like really, she has really good reflections, and she sometimes is like, actually it's quite normal if you feel anxious or if you feel kind of like uncomfortable when someone you care about is not responding, especially if you had like a maybe somehow consistent kind of like dynamic. So that's what I'm saying. It's like sometimes people, or sometimes the narrative is kind of like low key, saying not to feel certain emotions, or kind of like teaching you how to feel emotions when emotions are there. That's your feeling. Then you have to, I guess, have to find a way to like regulate your emotions and to understand or have language to those emotions, or having the space, you know, to validate and to welcome those emotions, and then having the rational or the logic or the tools to navigate those emotions and to engage in situations, or through your willpower be or let go of places that do not serve you subjectively and objectively, because sometimes I know there are things that we have to change, but sometimes situations are not good for you, and that's it, or they're not good for you at a certain point or time. And so again, so if you want to feel, if you want to have emotional health, of course you need to find, you need to have the knowledge, you need to have the tools, and obviously you need to find professional people who can help you with that. But I think a good way to start is when you are feeling your emotions. A good way to start is being curious about it. It's like, okay, instead of being like, I should not feel this way, or I should feel this way, is okay, this is what I'm feeling. I make space. How can I be loving to myself and understanding to myself, and validate that emotion and be curious about that? Because people feel emotions in different ways, and the narrative we have, or the beliefs we have about that emotion, is highly influenced by many factors, by our stories, our personal stories, our cultural our our culture, and our context, and the way we feel things, our body, and the things we believe. I don't know, society, social media, everything, all these things, our health, our physical health, all of it, our relationships, what people think about those things, what we've changed, um, in in regards to our beliefs or our mindset, all these things, um, add to the way we experience emotions, or the way we experience and navigate our emotional world. So it's a good thing to be curious instead of being shameful or invalidating our emotions or other people's emotions. Sometimes we, at least I've had this I don't want to call it problem, but these situations where I kind of like validate other people's emotions more than I validate myself. And I think that's a whole other topic. But yeah, it's finding that nice balance in between understanding your emotions, understanding also that your emotions don't necessarily justify your actions or other people's actions or behaviors, and also understanding that there's a rational, like there's a logic component to mm, understanding and to express and regulate our emotions. By the way, like in regulating our emotions, we have like our physical tools, like breathing and exercise and all these movement based alternatives. But there's also this logical component. And I was like, well, that would be like a behavioral component to regulating our emotions, but or our, health. But also, our having this mindset that actually adds up and works in our benefit, to regulate our emotions. And as you see, it's like kind of like this dance and balance between what we feel and what we believe, and what we feel and our behavior. And this is perfect to talk about how I see it from the astrological perspective. So we see our emotions, or our emotion dimension, or our emotional dimension to life in astrology in the fourth house, which is a house associated with Cancer. Fourth house, again, in astrology, we have 12 houses, which are technically 6 pairs of obviously 2 houses. The first house works with the seventh house. The second house works with the 8th. The third with the 9th, and the fourth, which is the one we're talking about today, associated with Cancer, works put together with the 10th house, which is a Capricorn house. So that axis, the fourth and the 10th house, that axis or that dimension is our emotional dimension. But our emotional and logical dimension too, it's our reality and what we feel inside. So it's like kind of like what is inside you, inside us, and what is outside of us. What we feel, and what we feel from an very deep perspective, and what we show to other people. So the fourth house is a house associated with Cancer. Again, it's a water sign, is ruled by the moon. Kind of like represents also the mother figure. And from the astrological perspective, that house is the house that received less light. Is like it's one of the 3 water houses or signs that has kind of like less light. So it's very deep, very intimate. It's like what only you, or maybe your mother or your caregiver, or the people who are very close to you can know. And even like only you, it's that very inner, like that inner connection with you, for example, and your caregiver, as I said before. But it's like that relationship, or those things that only you can feel. And do you, like, if you're listening to this, maybe like if you've listened till now, probably you've heard of Brene Brown, who I love her. And she was saying the other day, I heard her, I don't want to like misinterpret what she said, so forgive me if I do. She was saying like it's hard sometimes for people understand or feel what you're feeling, right? So it's like, oh, I know, like it's important to validate other people's feelings, yeah, but at the same time, it's kind of like hard to understand what they're feeling because it's something so intimate. It's something like only you can feel inside. And then through curiosity and asking, and through language and through definition, maybe you can understand it, like maybe from a rational and be empathetic and all these things. So this is what takes me to the opposite, you know? Remember I said definition. So the opposite of Cancer, which is complementary, not only opposite, is a complement, is Capricorn. Capricorn is ruled by Saturn. Saturn gives structure, definition, is reality. The 10th house, what people see or what you choose to share with other people. But other than that, there's that definition, that there's kind of like reality and that concept of structure. And actually, with, in this case, word, would define a certain emotion is like expressing or showing what you have inside or what you experience. So I think that's why language and definition, she actually talks about, having the appropriate language for what we feel. Sometimes like that's very frustrating. Like when you feel something and you're not able to actually express or let people know what you feel. But that's the importance of that kind of like reality and definition, or the things that give form to all this emotion, to all this water energy, to all this, like, I guess, fluctuation. I don't know. I don't know if that's a word. I'm trying to find the word. When you have like too much emotion, like overboarding in some kind of way, feelings. So from the astrological perspective, it's like that water, that emotion needs earth, needs structure, needs a way to channel, needs ground. But that ground, if we see it from like I don't know, for our environment and our plants, the plant world, vegetables and all these things, or like for harvesting things, water nurtures the soil, like kind of like in a way, like you have to water your plants, and not only like from the water aspect of like, or the physical qualities of water, but it's like you need to water or moist that earth, that things are compact or too rigid, that needs flexibility, needs emotion, literally. So having that nice balance in between your what you feel, and then being able to understand it and name it, and then through your willpower and your responsibility, again, and with your consistent behavior, again, remember when I said I was talking about consistency um at the beginning of the episode, channel that water, channel that emotion. I think that's healthy. I think that's a way to, be happier and be healthier and actually do the things that you want in life. Those emotions are our driving force, either to stop and to do that, either to stop or to go to the places where we want to be. And that consistency, that agency, that responsibility, that ability to respond and to have a healthy response to what we feel will take us where we want to go. So again, just a little reminder so that you remember or associate that, your emotions, and then your if you, as I like to do it, associating what I live on a daily basis with astrology. It's just a language. It's just a way, something I find fun to do. So it's like, it's a water sign, your emotions, or like the fourth house is the Cancer house, is your emotions. It's has to do with water and water energy, and then the Moon, the things that are kind of like what you feel in the dark, and then it's the darkest. I said it before. It's like the darkest space in the um, astrological chart, and then the opposite and the complement of that is that rationale, that structure, that space, that room that validates, or that roots and channels and gives structure to those emotions. And through that, you can manifest reality that is not only something cold or structured or rigid, but is this flexible reality that acknowledges, or that takes into account, or that gives space to being human and to life itself. So this is all I have for you for today. I hope you liked it. I hope you find balance in your life. I hope you choose to go or to act in a way that's beneficial for you. And I hope you're able to recognize and validate your emotions, like all of your emotions. And through doing that, I feel it's a way to also validate other people's emotions. And I hope you choose to be in places when you need. I hope you choose logic when you need it, to be in places that are better for you and for other people. And when you need it, also that you actually validate your emotions, and that you take care of yourself, and that you are loving to yourself and to the people around you, and that you understand that although sometimes things are not justifiable, what people do and their behaviors or what they feel, it's only human, and it only makes sense. But again, through a nice balance between validating what you feel and um, acting in a functional way, is, I think, the greatest gift. I'll see you next time. It will be our 6th episode. I heard some statistics that usually podcasts end by the 6th episode. So we are almost there. We're not gonna end. And then, because we still have a 7th episode to close this series of, like, this is the kind of like the fundamentals of this podcast. And then we'll be elaborating in each of those dimensions. It's all, of course, full circle, like the astrological chart, and as life is a cycle. So I'll see you next time. I'll stop talking. See you next time. Bye bye.